Hey guys, how are you? Today I'm going to talk about Canada. I am Canadian, and there's a lot of talk about Canada right now, especially in the United States, with whether the United States should just absorb us into their great nation, and dissolve the border between the two of us. And according to Donald Trump, that would be an amazing connection to have us as his 51st state. So that's interesting. And so we're going to go over the Canadian chart here a little bit. And I'm going to share the Canadian chart with you all. And we're going to look at this and kind of find out what is happening. At least I think I'm going to share these things with you. There we go. Okay, so you can see that Canada came into existence as a nation on July 1st of 1867 at 12:05 p.m. in the city of Ottawa, Canada. And we still, even at this time in 1867, were very much connected with the British and one of the Commonwealths of Britain. And so by this time in 1867, the United States of America had already separated from Britain with their American Revolution in 1776 and onward, and became an independent nation, I believe, in 1777. I've got Canada all over the place. So not so much the United States of America, but they're here somewhere. And yeah, they became in 1776. They became the United States of America and separated from the British colonies or Britain. And Britain was a powerhouse at that time and had influenced and became part of the world at large, Australia, India, several colonies off in the Caribbean. They were massive and they were really quite powerful. And that separation with the United States kind of had to do with a couple of things. And one of them, of course, was the Pluto power and wealth was moving through the tail end of Capricorn and into Aquarius as it is now. And one of the big beefs with the United States back in those days was that America was paying more than their fair share to the British to support their endeavors in conquering other communities and nations. Similar today, that the United States is saying that they are paying way more to the world at large, and they're not really getting anything back. And a form of taxation similar to tariffs and the threat of tariffs, that they are paying more taxes for the goods and services around the world coming into their country than they need to be paying, and therefore it's unfair. And they want to break away from that system, just as they wanted to break away from the British with taxation without representation. And that, of course, launched them into the American Revolution and the separation, which is Pluto in Aquarius, and the divisions. So similar today, as in back then, even, the United States in some ways was looking to Canada in 1776 and before that in 1775 for us to kind of become part of that independence. And we chose at that time to remain loyal to the British and the British colonies. And of course, we became one of the Commonwealths of Britain. And so many of the loyalists in the American Revolution fled and settled into Nova Scotia and also settled into the upper and lower Canada. And, and we actually formed our own democracy um, shortly after that between 1773 and 1785. But it's interesting because that border, just like now, was really highlighted of what now becomes the United States in their quest for autonomy and independence from from Britain and what actually became part of Canada. And we're kind of doing that today in many ways. Also, we also weren't supportive of the slave trade, even though Britain was heavily involved in the slave trade. We, as Canadians, I guess, chose that we would shelter some or many of those individuals who came or could get across the border into Canada. So the border was developed through many of these events that happened between Canada and the United States and our defense of our own sovereignty. So there was a moment where both countries of Canada and the United States were seeking more autonomy, individuality, and really kind of separating in their own way to govern their own affairs. And even in Canada, we were doing that. We weren't necessarily under the full, we were under the full authority of the British, but we weren't necessarily governors were put into place to represent Canada at that time. So there was a lot of turmoil going on back in those days. There was a lot of shifting and determining identity. There was a lot of reform, economics, a lot of change was happening. And we're seeing these shifts today in 2024 and 2025. There's lots of power struggles that are taking place, and Canada isn't exempt from this, just like we weren't exempt from it back in the 1700s, 1775, 1776, or 1777. So we developed as a nation farther on 100 years later from America. And we became this chart here. So we have Libra rising. And if any of you know us Canadians, we are always saying, oh, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. And we kind of give the impression that we're really nice people, which we probably are, very accommodating, very diplomatic in many ways. And we are just pleasant to be around. Justice, fairness, equality issues are top of mind because Libra rules the scales in the judicial system, and we're polite. And Canada around the world has been known to be polite. So we're saying these thank yous. We're inclusive. We want to be part of. But yeah, we have trouble deciding. We can't make up our minds. And we could seem really, really rather inconsistent. Is saying one thing, having trouble making decisions, and just really kind of flaky in many ways. Because we don't have that power of energy that the United States has. And the chart I use for the United States has Sagittarius rising. I don't use the Libra one just because I'm a Canadian and I recognize the difference in our two nations. So this chart also is ruled, the ruler of her is the planet Venus. And Venus, of course, you see right here, Venus is at 16 degrees of Gemini. And we have a lot to offer. We have a lot to say. We're very inclusive and we want to cooperate and be a part of the international stage at large and involved in foreign countries and foreign interests. And we really do, in the whole essence of our being, want to share those resources. We want to be a part of what is happening in the world. And so this ninth house is really prominent because we have the sun, Uranus, the moon, Venus, and then Vesta in there. Now, the ninth house is really about those issues that are going on in foreign countries and foreign policies that are emerging, and such as immigration. And you know, that Venus Gemini connection is really tied to immigration and education, that people come into our country because they are now coming here and getting through the immigration process much faster by attending secondary education. And that is sort of a policy and an open door avenue, I suppose, that immigrants. We are quite welcoming of immigration. The country was formed on the concept of people immigrating to Canada and settling Canada. So we don't necessarily, we're not closed to immigrants and immigration. And that has really expanded over the last year with Jupiter there in that ninth house. So the amount of the immigrants coming into Canada is really quite large. Now, Venus is square to the south node in the Canadian chart, and that really kind of spells, things like unions that have emerged, the protection of the worker from losing their job. But in recent years, it could have had an impact with immigrants taking some jobs of the Canadian population as well. And sort of a dysfunction in how immigrants come over here and how they are allowed into the workforce in Canada. So there are some triggers here that are going on and some hurts, I guess, and perhaps some legal challenges that are about to take place. And on the labor force itself, where we could see an impact on the ordinary everyday working man that's coming to light here. So Pluto is down here in the fourth house, and I'm going to start with Pluto in 2025. Pluto, of course, was the trigger planet in the United States that really went to task against the British Army to release it through taxation, wealth, and control of who was in control and who wanted to be in control. So Pluto here in the Canadian chart is in the fourth house or transiting through the fourth house. Now, this fourth house is associated with land, borders, sovereignty, housing, real estate, places to live. Where do we live? Supplies, farming, agriculture, and also tourism and or immigration if the ninth house is connected to this. And so Pluto has been transiting through here since 2009, 10, and we've really seen a shift with governments becoming involved in housing, the building of housing, um, and and housing for new people coming into the country. Also, food distribution through agriculture and agricultural means. Now, Pluto and the fourth house are really connected to mining and underground things like oil and gas, although Neptune is more in alignment with that. But Pluto is anything that is underneath the earth. So we really recognize in Canada that our earth and our resources here are our wealth and our raw materials, lumber, our vast wilderness, fishing, mining, minerals, but also our water and our waterways. This is big business in Canada. And the Canadian government really places a strong emphasis on the recognition of our wealth and the breadbasket that Canada holds with some of these resources. So Pluto represents that there is definitely changes and shifts that are taking place here. Pluto is still about wealth and about transformation and the changes that are coming to how we can invest or become part of in a business or in a business sense. And I'm not sure you'd have to look in history if that was going on back in the day in the late 1800s, because the Industrial Revolution had already started by then. So we were already tapping into some of those. Pluto is also about taxes. So we're going to see a shift here because Pluto's newly in Aquarius, a shift within the taxation system, how some of those businesses are taxed, those big wealthy businesses are taxed. And taxes are prime because we have an election going on right now. Definitely the Conservative Party is talking about these taxes and, government taxes and people struggling with the overburden of taxes. And the concept of fair, like what is fair with our taxation system up on the land, the educational taxation system in association with our housing taxes, but also taxation with those big businesses and who is paying them and who needs to be paying them. And we could see a real shift in how we tax people during this 2025, 2026 era. And the management of housing and the resources and the distribution of resources that we have in our country, rather than one sector or another contributing more or less than the other one. So Aquarius is very much about individuality, freedom, independence, and fairness, to be fair and just, which is what the Canadian chart really represents with its Libra rising. And it's going to come into a beautiful trine with Pluto here. So there is some adjustment that's taking place for the country, but generally it's going to be positive for the general population. So there's a lot of shifts that are taking place all around the world here with taxation, because tariffs are a form of taxation. And who is paying? The concept that Donald Trump is saying is who is paying and is it fair? We want to even the scales and make it fair. And so that is some major shift that we really should take note of. And it's really going to influence the world and how Canada responds to these things that are happening in the world. So that it's interesting what is transpiring here as we reconsider our options and our identity as a nation and who we want to be and how we want to be perceived by the rest of the world, because we have all of these huge planets here in Cancer in the ninth house, foreign connections. So the sun is in Cancer and Uranus is sitting right there. So in a democracy, the people rule the leader. They are elected by the people, especially in nations like Canada and the United States. With a Cancer sun or a Cancer country, the leaders are ruled by the people. However, Uranus is right there in between this sun and moon, and we're just about to hit, like actually the moon, just shortly after the creation of Canada, was about to be a new moon, but it had to cross Uranus. So there was most likely a great deal of struggle happening in the 1700s, in the mid 1700s, and also shortly after the creation of Canada's conception, that there would have been a lot of people struggling for survival in Canada at this time. So the South Node is in Libra, is in Virgo. Sorry, the North Node is in Virgo and the South Node is in Pisces. And what we're getting in 2025 with the eclipses is we're getting the exact opposite. So the South Node is in Virgo and the North Node is transiting through the sixth house of Pisces. And this is the axis of health, the medical system, but also bigger than that, because it's the 12th and 6th houses. It is the institutions within the system. So the medical system and those institutions, such as large hospitals, prison systems, are about to transform and change with that South Node as we move through 2025. And the North Node in the sixth house is going to most likely create new jobs emerging, also in that on that health access and the well-being of people. And the sixth house is, of course, the working man, the man that goes to work 9 to 5, or the man that gets up every morning and saunters out to the field to do their agriculture, or the miner, or anybody, the South, and the police, the safety and security of our nation. So there is a lot happening, and there's protection also, because policing and protection, it goes hand in hand in the wealth and well-being of a nation, that we have secured our borders with drugs, or the potential for drugs coming across into the United States, or even coming across into Canada from various areas. That's a big deal. That was a big deal for the Trump administration, and that continues to hold. It seemed a bit confusing to start with, maybe still is a bit confusing because of the Pisces elements that are transversing here. So we've already had this major eclipse that happened March 14th and again on March 29th. First, that massive lunar eclipse on the 14th, which was a South Node. It was established that the mentality, or how Canada really thinks, needs to change. And it's in Virgo, the working man, and how are we going to structure this difference so we don't have job losses, so we have the work and the resources available. So our leaders got together through the provinces and started to hash through that, and maybe started to let go of some boundaries, which is that sixth house of integration of work across Canada, and the boundaries are dissolving and more opportunity is coming for jobs and the expansion of jobs in different areas and opening up those resources. So the sixth house of Canada in 2025 is really highlighted. And that is, of course, the health and well-being of the nations and also the jobs that we have coming to light here. So we're going to see that in September again. And that is going to be a big part and parcel of what is beginning to transform as we move through 2025. The eclipses are like open doorways that open and close, and as one slams shut, another one opens with the North Node eclipse. And so it's generally quite a positive thing with the North Node eclipses. And we could actually see as that North Node drops down and these two nodes hit this connection to where they were when the Canada was formed in the opposite direction, that we really shift our perspective and our way of thinking in terms of how we work, how we function, and how we integrate with each other. Chiron is in that sixth house as well naturally, and Chiron produces challenges because we have deep wounds here, and that trigger us. Bizarre things that all of a sudden the jobs dissolve, like there's just no more. And Chiron can kind of produce this revolutionary kind of energy that we feel excluded, left out, a little rebellious against that. But we really rely on each other and the work that we can do together in order to sustain ourselves going forward. Chiron in the sixth house like this can really indicate that we could feel like we have been excluded to some degree from the rest of the world, or we're just not a powerhouse that we wanted to be on the world stage. So that is a big thing that is happening with 2025. So I want to talk about Mars for just a minute because this is going to be the first part of the series in this. So we have Mars here, which went retrograde on the 7th of December. And you can see Mars right now is sitting at 24 degrees of Cancer. Now, this Mars crossed this group of planets back here in November, and that signaled, obviously, the onset through the election that, and even prior to that, in October, that there was some things emerging on the international stage that could be quite upsetting. And have an impact on the people of Canada and threats to the leadership. And this is when, of course, our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, started to have some unpopularity with the people of Canada. So Mars now is in that 10th house, and that's really demanding that our leaders take some sort of action and they do something for the people because it's in Canada. It also brought forward this camaraderie in Canada to say we have our own sovereignty. It's very patriotic. It's very protectionist. And in many ways, we don't really come out swinging most of the time. We're really subdued because of the Libra rising. But there was action being taken here. action for the products and the people were actually taking steps and still are taking steps in order to secure the protection of Canada and our own sovereignty. And this is going to continue until Mars reaches Aries once again. And then there could be some more back and forth that is emerging when it is challenged as it heads into Leo. That would really indicate at that time that there's the possibility of new leadership with Mars heading into the sign of Leo. So the faltering of our leadership happened last year, and there was the need for good leadership due to some of the threats coming forward to our land and our country, because Canada in Cancer is our country. So it won't be till April 17th, that we could really see a surge forward in somebody, because we're in an election right now, of somebody who potentially is going to actually take the lead and take charge in this election to lead us down the road in our protectionist kind of energy that is going on. Speeches and a real strong voice, because Mars is going to hit that 4 degrees of Leo around April 27th and 28th and 29th, just when the Canadian election is taking place. So this is prominence of somebody rising to the forefront that is really ready to take the stage and lead Canada into 2025 and deal with a lot of the prominent things that are surfacing on an international stage. So I'm going to leave you right here, and I'm going to get back to you with part 2 of what is happening, and there could even be 3 parts, what is actually happening to Canada and what is expected in the next several months as we head deeper into 2025. So have a great evening, and I'll chat about it further. Please leave a comment below if you have any history behind the conception of Canada or what was going on in the 1700s, or if you're an astrologer and want to contribute to the discussion. Have a great day. Bye.